Hello, everybody. Welcome to this talk from APS. My name is Kris. I am one of the co-founders and have the immense pleasure of talking to you today about the AEON2. It is our latest, well, almost latest monitor because we have now Classic 2020, but it is certainly one of the more interesting things we've been working on for the last few years, and I'll tell you a bit more about it. Hello, Jershov. Yeah, that's Greg. Jeff. Hi, Jeff. Nice to see you guys. Hopefully we'll have some more folks coming in. We'll be talking a little bit about the history of the monitor, about what it does for us, for me as well, and also, of course, about its very nice extension called the base extender, which is has been designed precisely to work with the AEON2. And for those who missed the entry, obviously they can watch it later because it'll be archived on YouTube. Well, once again, welcome, and hopefully we'll have Greg as well joining us. Hi, Matt. Nice to see you too. Greg has had some difficulties regarding his Skype connection, so hopefully he'll manage to call me up, and I'll manage to drop him in on my streaming platform. We'll see about that. So maybe we should start with a little introduction. So this is AEON2 and the extender in all their glory. As you notice, these are two separate boxes. We started with the AEON2 first, and then we added the extender. Now, AEON2 is a very interesting monitor. It really stems from our friendship with the Germano Studios and Tony Germano, and is basically a brainchild of our relationship. So say if APS is the father, maybe Germano could be the mother, or vice versa, whichever way the other side prefers. When we first started having a relationship with the recording studio in New York, the Germano studio, we quickly realized that perhaps a very good way to continue forward from them working with the AEON, the original AEON speakers, would be perhaps to work on a new design that's completely fresh and that's particularly designed with the American market in mind. So what we've ended up with is here the AEON2. Now you'll probably be asking, is this a follow-up from AEON? And I would say yes and no. It's not really like an upgraded version of AEON. It's more like a separate speaker, separate design. And I'm thinking, well, it's kind of surprising because it's a smaller box in a sense. It's not as impressive as AEON1, but it does have a lot of great additions to it. So you'll notice for those who know the original AEON, we had circular bass reflex vents, and now we have the one that's just on the bottom of it, and it really has made a huge difference to the way this speaker behaves. When we were testing them before the production, I was putting them side by side, testing with some really low end kicks and basses, and I was amazed at how this new design was behaving. And so I'm very happy with it, obviously. Now the speaker is using, as usual, a mix of a high-end tweeter and from CS, as well as a custom woofer, as is usually the case with APS speakers. We have them built for us. Greg, who hopefully will be joining us, will be able to say more about it. But what basically you could say, well, Kris, it's a smaller speaker, smaller woofer. How come it plays better, right? So the idea was to give the speaker a much tighter control over the low frequency, and we thought we could achieve that by getting in the first place, getting the woofer a smaller woofer, much more power to the speaker, and a precisely redesigned electronics in order to achieve that kind of control. Thinking perhaps that we could later on add something to it, which is what the bass extender has become eventually. So here it is. I'm going to show you a bit of maybe a frequency chart. This is just the AEON2. So as you can see, it's pretty flat. It works pretty well all the way down to 50-40 hertz really, and it's got really powerful amplifiers. They are 200 watts for the low end and 100 watts for the top end. And let me just go back to this. There you go. Hold on. Okay. And so the way this has been designed, that we thought, okay, we have to think about the possible extension and how it'll interact with the original speaker. So what we did is, for those who could be asking if the extender is for another speaker, well, really it was designed with the AEON2 in mind, so it's specifically made for that. Let's have a look first at AEON2 back. You will notice that this is more or less a classic design, classic APS design. We have the input, an XLR combo jack input on the left with the output just on top. That allows us to actually link with the extender, but it has been present in our design practically from the beginning, and it allows for connecting subwoofers and things like that. Then you have to the right the volume, which I suppose doesn't need any explanation. It's basically a volume knob. What I do usually, I set it so that it plays well with my volume control. I'll just break off for a second just to see, because I see Greg is trying to call me up. Hold on. I have to the right the volume. Hi, Greg.
Hello. Hi, Kris.
Hi, it's nice to hear you. I'll be trying to hook you up to the stream. Hold on a second, because this is a bit of a conundrum. Hold on. So hopefully this will work online. Sure. Yeah.
I need to get out for a while.
Sure. Okay. Hopefully this will work. Greg is gonna come back online in a second. I can already see here his line is working. We won't be seeing him as he doesn't have a webcam on his computer. So one wonders what the tech whiz is using as a computer. But I suppose it only needs to serve him for the design of our beautiful speakers. So that should be okay. Meanwhile, I'll answer maybe the first questions. Do you need to use additional subwoofer when you're using bass extenders, or are they kind of replacement for the sub? Well, I'd say they are and not. It depends if you're using it in a 5.1 or an Atmos system where the sub's a separate channel anyway. This is meant to be an extension, making it kind of into a three-way. So I've always preferred two subs, and really I preferred the subs to be basically on the same level as the speaker. I'm not a big fan of a big distance between the two, unless it's an LFE in a 5.1 system, which is a totally different setup. I was never a big fan of 2.1 with the sub complementing the two monitors. Here we have the best of both worlds. If you have a look at that, okay, let's see, there you go. So what you have here, they are pretty close together. I don't make them touch, so the woofer is not moving the AEON2 box too much. Now you can set them up on some kind of a foam to make it, to make it work. And so yes, well, it's not really a replacement for a sub. It's an extension, but it is a replacement if you're talking about a 2.1 system. Okay, there is another question. What is the main advantage of using AEON2 over the new Classic 2020, except, I guess, high level volume? Well, really, I mean, it's like, two cars. One is 4 times as expensive or 3 times as expensive, but yet it does the same thing. So AEON2 is kind of the same. I mean, all of our speakers are designed with utmost fidelity in mind. So you can use Classic 2020. Where the AEON2 shines really is the really low end and the levels at which you can play it. So it makes it very compatible with bigger rooms and perhaps a culture of mixing louder, so to speak. I'm not very keen on very high levels in monitoring, but some people are. So AEON2 is definitely made for them as well. Also, the overall quality of the speaker is from much higher shelf, so you can be expecting a overall bump in the quality. And definitely what I've noticed is a kind of a higher resolution when I'm working with the mixes and sweeping through bands and working on certain frequencies. I can really nail the mix in a way that I really practically haven't been using any other monitor. You can see just to the side of the AEON2 here, I have a little coax that's been sitting with me for years and years. And I haven't, in all honesty, I haven't been using it that much since I have the AEON2. I mean, coax has some perks due to its coaxial nature, but I'm mainly using for the 90% of the time AEON2. And I'm finding that the actual frequency response on many different systems is pretty predictable. If you know the tonal balance isotope control, it kind of sounds like that, meaning anything that I'll see on tonal balance control, I can hear it in the AEON and vice versa. So it's a very precise tool, makes me feel extremely confident with the decisions I'm taking during my production process. Greg? Okay, you're here. Okay, so I'll go back to my, because let's see, can I see you here? No, you're not here. You're only here when I'm talking. Okay, good. Can you guys confirm that you can hear Greg? Greg, can you say a few words and present yourself maybe?
I'm Greg.
Hi, Greg. So Greg is our APS designer, as I've said, and he's kindly agreed to join me on that talk. You must be wary. He is the absolute Jedi Master of all things speaker related, and not only. And he can basically take you to a whole new level of power in terms of understanding these things. Definitely he has taken me on many occasions and definitely made a wiser man of me in the course of that. Jeff has said we can hear him. Okay, Greg, I've been talking a little bit about just as a kind of an introduction to the speaker. I haven't gone into extender yet. So maybe I thought you could take us through some technicalities, things that you found interesting in the course of designing the speaker, maybe some interesting stories you might want to share with us.
What can I say? Everybody says that technical details are boring, so maybe okay.
We are in a good group. We are in the group that will appreciate, I think.
Let me look at some tables. I heard that there was a questions about the differences between Classic 2020 and AEON2. Maybe we can say something about the differences in case of some the most important parameters shortly, because numbers are numbers and performance is performance. So it is not exactly numbers do not show everything related to
they don't tell the whole story, of course.
Yeah, sure. they show only the, let's say, the top of the iceberg, but the whole story is much bigger, greater. So maybe the crossover frequencies are similar. I mean, classic and AEON2, and the idea of the overall idea of the how to say, crossover design, the equalization, and so on is similar. So that is why when you talk, when you look at these two studio monitors, you can find some similarities in the sound. And when you compare these two studio monitors with the other ones, with the studio monitors of other brands, so you can hear the difference. You can hear, and so because this is our some sort of philosophy. So the idea is more or less the same, because there is no reason to use other kind of thinking of let's say design, just because you are creating cheaper studio monitors.
Sure.
That note makes sense in my opinion.
So what could you tell us in a few points, like short points, the differences you think are the most important for you from the design point of view?
When you talk about AEON2, the greatest differences. The greatest differences is drivers, enclosure, the box, and the electronics. I mean power supplies, and also the crossover is much more sophisticated. Much more. No, not much more. It's more sophisticated. Classic. But this is not like the huge difference. This is the difference, of course, in the crossover. It is cheaper in classic, and but the idea is more or less the same. No, yes.
Okay.
It is like this. So when we talk about the drivers, AEON2 the diameter the diameter of the driver is more or less the same, but AEON2 uses a much more powerful driver, and also its internal construction is at the higher level. So when you talk about its performance, I mean its SPL, it's the stations, and it's also when you talk about the woofer, I mean it is much more difficult to destroy the woofer in AEON2 than in classic.
Really?
Yeah, really, it is much more. I forgot the word. Maybe I will use some help. So it is more. On the one hand, it is more difficult to destroy the woofer from the AEON2, and on the other one, on the other hand, its quality is higher. So to say, it is built from the parts, but it is built from the higher quality parts.
Okay.
AEON2. So this is, in simple words, this is the difference between the woofers.
Right.
The idea of the when the designer of the woofer is thinking how to do the woofer, so the idea I can see it is similar. Both tried to create the woofer that whose sound is as detailed as possible, I can say.
So what you mean is, the classic and the AEON share the the design philosophies, but where they differ is in the actual quality of the drivers that you chose.
Yes, I should
Okay.
say that because these woofers comes from different countries and
Yeah.
different companies, and I can say that they had some sort of budget for the woofer for classic and for the woofer for
Sure.
EON2.
Sure.
In this budget, they tried to create as detailed woofer as possible. I should say I
Okay.
say
Yeah.
about details because it shouldn't be powerful. It shouldn't have bass extremely or something on the efficiency or something. It should be. They were thinking about the quality of the sound,
Sure.
and these are the similarities. And anyway, this is because we used these woofers. So this is the similarities and the differences when we talk about the woofer. And more or less, this is the same. The same is when you talk about tweeters, it is more or less the same.
Okay.
On the one hand, the tweeter for the EON2 is more powerful, or much more powerful. The differences are bigger, and on the other hand, the sound quality of the tweeter for EON2 is much higher.
Okay.
So when you just listen to the studio monitors, when you have the possibilities to listen to have a listening test, and when you compare the sound of the overall loudspeakers, when you have some sort of switch, and when you can switch between those two, the first thing, and everybody. Even who is not
sound engineer,
sound engineer, and because I had some experience with that, somebody should say that, yeah, I can hear much more interesting highs. I mean the high frequencies is more. You can hear
more detail in the high frequencies,
much more details, much more the material. You can focus your attention on the material, on the details that are coming from the tweeter from EON2, and when you talk about a classic, you can see that high frequencies are okay. It is a difference.
Although I do.
Okay.
I was testing both the EN2 and the Classic 2020 next to the old Classic, and I set them up with the proper levels, SPL and everything, and I was working on them, or listening to some music and working on them and switching with my controller, where I can switch easily between three pairs of monitors. And the thing I did notice, especially with the Classic 2020 exactly, is how close it was in terms of the timbre. So it's not so much the detail, but the sound of it. I was kind of surprised that although, as you say, the EN2 does provide more detail and a much more controlled bass, it still gave me a Classic, still gave me the kind of feedback that made me feel comfortable with it. It's just that it didn't go as far as EN2, which is understandable, I suppose.
Okay.
Would you like to say something about the electronics, perhaps, or?
Yeah, we have. Let's say something about the power of the nominal power of the power amplifiers. In EON2 you have almost 200 watts for the woofer.
Yeah.
And in Classic 2020 you have 100 watts. So we have 2 times greater power for the EON2, and what is the reason is that you can achieve because of that 3 dB higher SPL.
Right.
So this is the difference, because when you work on the medium level or on the higher level, only because of the differences in the power and in this SPL, you have less, let's say, less amount of peaks when you when you work at high level, when you listen to loud music.
Yes.
Much less peaks in the when the material is dynamic. You have much less peaks that are cut because of the limits of the power.
It translates a lot to, guys. We double in modern music, which means loudness is there to really bring out the best and worst in music, really. And the way we work now, my mixes turn around -16 before they are mastered. They are mastered to -12. But if I'm working on something a little bit more modern, like hip hop or maybe a hard rock band, then I'll be pushing the mastering levels towards 10. I'm not mastering myself, but when I'm mastering, engineering Magda, I'm asking her to kind of, to go for those levels. And when I'm listening on the AEON2, it really gives me an extra breathing room for listening to those things at these levels. And classic obviously has a little bit less headroom in that respect. It's not just SPL, it's the way it reacts to peaks, and the way it reacts almost, when I'm bringing in the Zena limiter or something heavy like that on the drums is a little bit different. I hear it. These are the little details that you can hear between Classic 2020 and AEON2. Although, as I said, both are. If I had no choice, I would be perfectly happy working on the Classic 2022. Right. I was thinking perhaps, Greg, that we could go over the back side of it. You just have to bear with me for a second. I need to copy your Skype source onto my next page. Hold on. Let's see if that works. Okay, you should be there too. What about here? No, you're not here either. Okay. So you can't see what I'm seeing unless you switch on the YouTube channel, Greg, but I'm looking at the AEON2 back panel. So I've already gone through, I've gone up to volume knob, going from the left side before you've joined us. So perhaps it's a good spot to pick up from and continue with the tweeter, the bass modes, and the woofer equalizer. What do you think?
Maybe we were just talking about the power of the amplifiers. Maybe a couple of words related to power supply, because it builds a difference also. But what makes our what is the reason of the price also? Because we know that when somebody need to spend money for the studio system, the studio monitor is also expensive. One of the reasons is the power supply. Because we do not use switch mode power supplies.
You mean both in Classic and AEON2?
Yes. Yeah. We use only switch mode power supplies only in our subwoofers.
Right.
And in studio monitors, when you work with high, middle, and higher bass frequencies, we use analog electronics, including analog power supply. And what is important when we are talking about power supply? The important thing is as constant voltage of the power supply as
Right.
possible. I mean, the stiffer power supply, the high quality of the sound. There is something when you bring into mind the high-end amplifiers, audio amplifiers for home applications. They have huge power supplies.
Yeah, the supplies the power supplies are really humongous for those.
The power supplies are tremendous, and if it is a transformer, it is heavy and expensive. It is expensive because it has a lot of copper and a lot of core. I mean, the material for the core, because you need to have core to try and transmit energy from the input,
right,
the output,
to the other.
Using magnetic field.
How did you manage that with EN2?
EON2 is equipped with much stronger and much more expensive transformer.
Okay.
It is also related to the capacitors in the power supply.
Okay.
And when you work on high levels, you can feel when you listen to music with EON2, you maybe only me, but I had a feeling that it brings into my mind the experience from the audiophiles devices when the equipment is expensive. I mean, it is expensive because of expensive amplifier, power amplifier.
So basically, what you're saying is that EN2 is perfect for all those audiophile people.
When you are talking about the money spent for the power supply, it is just as you said.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So all this power supply has been power supply talk led us maybe to the whole idea behind connecting it with the bass extender. But before we go there, because it's also a question of power, right? But before we go there, let me just quickly explain to our viewers what we are dealing here with. Those who know APS speakers are probably very familiar with the layout, but for those who don't, I'll just quickly explain the little switches and what they do. So the bass switch has 3 positions: active, passive, and roll-off. And here we basically passive. And Greg, please correct me if I'm wrong. Passive basically means there is no extension with the electronics, right? It's just the box working, and
the woofer in the box.
The woofer in the box, yeah.
With
the box. And do you remember off the top of your head how low does it go on a passive mode?
I got some. There is a we prepared some EON2 bass extender short manual. We have some manual for the bass extender, and in these 2 pages manual
we have them. I don't remember the actual frequency, but the idea is that if you want, you can use the and that's present in basically all of our speakers. You can use that mode to just make the speaker work acoustically and not being pushed anymore by the active extension which you have on the left. So if you switch the switch to the left, then you extend that range by so much. Again, I don't remember off the top of my head, but you can look it up if you want. We're not big salesmen, forgive the pun. And then on the right, you have the roll-off. So the roll-off basically means the opposite, right? We're cutting off some frequencies in order to maybe make it. Well, actually, we'll go into that maybe later.
Mainly to release the woofer.
Exactly, to release the woofer, make it work less. Right.
Yeah. And then you have less issues related to Doppler
effect.
To Doppler.
Doppler effect, yeah. Now, those who maybe have never heard of Doppler before now, you've heard definitely the effect of Doppler, which is the ambulance sound and the car coming by you when the frequencies get added by the speed. The speed of the car adds to the frequency, so you get that distinctive wow sound. So what Greg is referring to is the woofer. By moving back and forth, it adds actually to the frequencies above, right, Greg? That's what you mean by Doppler effect here.
But we can, in a few words, we can say what is the problem of the Doppler effect when we are talking about the loudspeakers, mainly about when you're talking about woofers or mid woofers, or let's say mid woofers. We had some. A couple of years ago, we created a little monitor using wideband driver, high efficient wideband driver, and the frequency response started, let's say, from 70 hertz or 60 hertz, and it ended up at 20 kilo. 20 kilo. And because when you have been listening to the music or sound material, you need to the woofer was radiating all the frequencies at the same time, and at low frequencies the movement of the diaphragm was high. So let's say if there was some bass, let's say bass, when you played bass and the frequency was let's say 60 hertz or something, the diaphragm was moving at high levels, because the diameter of the wideband driver was like 10 centimeters or something, 12, I don't remember. And at the same time, this moving diaphragm was radiating the frequencies, the high frequencies. High frequencies. And when you listen to something like that, you can hear some. You hear what to say, harsh. The high frequencies are you can hear some sort of harsh. It is annoying. It is not. It is when you listen to this, you don't feel you don't comfort. Yes.
But that's an effect that we have on all the monitors, right? This is the Doppler effect touches any monitor that uses a mid woofer that reproduces low frequencies as well as the mid and higher mid frequencies, right?
Yes, but I'd like to say something. When you it was a little monitor. We had it in our hands, just before our face, and when you just move the box, when you turn left or turn right, the box at 90 degrees. So when you during the listening, you could turn it to the right, just to hear it from its side, from its left or right side, and the Doppler effect it disappears, because Of course, there are some polar response changes, but when you turn the speaker, when you listen the speaker from its side, there is no Doppler effect,
Okay.
and you could hear that the harsh disappeared. Of course, the high frequencies were on the lower level, but the harsh disappeared. It was just because of the Doppler effect. So when you use normal studio monitors, you listen to them from its front. So
So would you say?
you suffer from the Doppler effect.
So it would be interesting to see how much of that, 2 kilohertz, famous 2 kilohertz, which still is reproduced by the woofer, is due to that. Because I mean, often it's a frequency we have some problems with, and perhaps I suppose that becomes more apparent as you push the speaker, right? So if you want to, as a general rule of thumb, if you want to control this effect, the best way to listen to speakers is so that the woofer doesn't have as much extension, right?
Yeah. When you design the studio monitor, you need to look for some I forgot the word. You can have all fishes or your aquarium.
Okay, you can have either that or that. Okay, shall we go on with the woofer equalizer? Well, that's just a basic equalizer, shelf equalizer, minus 1.5 and minus 3. That's also to deal with certain environmental issues, so to speak. I have them flat. I have a big room. I don't need to roll anything off or shelf them down. And also at the end you have on top of base you have the tweeter, which is plus 1.5, minus 1.5. I think it pretty much speaks for itself. But if you have questions, please do write them down here, and we'll try to answer them. Now
sorry, Kris. We were talking about the switch for the bass, and maybe to bring it to the end. When you look, I come back to the instruction for the bass extender. It's AEON2 bass extender short manual, and there are 3 graphs. How does it work? The AEON along with its bass extender. And you can switch between, there are 3 graphs, and they represent the 3 positions of the bass controller. And what changes? You change you change this controller in AEON2. And at the same time, you change this controller in bass extender. There are 3 positions for AEON2 as well as for bass extender.
I'm looking at that. I'm gonna bring it up on picture.
To achieve the proper relation between those 2. And when you switch from active to passive and to roll off, you switch between the crossover frequencies between the studio monitor and AEON2 and between its bass extender.
I've just put it up so people can see it now. I've put the frequency charts.
Are like 35 hertz, 50 hertz, and 100 hertz. It is a difference. You can. So if you switch between those positions, you switch between crossover frequencies, and the sum, the overall frequency response of these 2 devices is more or less the same. Only the crossover frequency changes, and it is like 35, 50, and 100.
There is a question concerning the frequency at which the tweeter equalizer works. Could you tell us more about that? What's the frequency at which the tweeter correction works? What we mean, the plus or minus 1.5?
We are talking about AEON2, yeah?
Yeah.
There is a shelf filter or shelving filter, and it's we say that yes, we write something like that, plus
1.5 and plus, yeah, but
yeah,
it's the question concerns the frequency.
It is related to 10 kilohertz.
10 kilohertz, okay.
Yes,
All right.
And at 20 kilohertz it is higher than 1.5,
Okay.
and of course at lower frequency it is lower than
Okay.
1.5. It is related to 10 kilohertz.
Okay, so Jeff, I hope the question got the answer you were looking for. Basically, it will matter, for example, in places where, for example, you've done too much absorption in your listening environment, so that tweeter boost can help a little bit with this, and vice versa. If there's a little bit too much of reflections in the room, you can bring that down in order to compensate for that. Now I've shown you I've gone a bit faster than I wanted to, because Greg started talking about the woofer and the extender and the AEON and the relationship between the two. So if I just bring that chart, if you have a look at that chart, and then I'll just keep in mind, so you can tell where the AEON starts working, right, and where the extender picks up, in order to give a more or less flat response from the whole system. If I turn that off now, and look, hold on, let me have a look. There you go. So you see here on the bass extender, you have the same thing that's called AEON2 bass. What it means, you need to set those two in the same way. So if you set AEON2 bass here to roll off, then you set the bass extender to roll off, right? And what it means really is, right, Greg, correct me, it'll basically make it act in the as if it was on the left side. That's the chart, right? You're looking at the red line, kind of red, I think. I'm a little bit colorblind. Red line, dark
Brown,
red line,
brown.
brown is AEON. You can see the woofer picking up higher at higher, the extender picking up the frequency higher up. So if we look in passive mode, for example, and then, so this is the middle position, then here it's the middle frequency chart. You can also see how they interact. You can also see the resulting frequency response in green. Okay, so there are slight differences, not big, but slight differences in there. And then we have the active position, in which AEON2 is working the most, so to speak, and then inversely the woofer works least. I find this position to be, in my case in the studio, something I'm not using. I'm using rather I'm basically playing around with the passive and the roll-off mode. The idea behind me using that, and Greg, please tell me if I'm wrong in my theory, is that by using the roll-off mode, for example, I'm really saving power for AEON2 to reproduce frequencies above, and then let the extender work and take on the heaviest load in the lower frequencies. Am I right?
Could you repeat?
Yeah,
please?
but well, when you're setting the AEON2 to roll off, right?
Yeah.
And setting the bass extender to roll off as well, then what we are ending up with is the leftmost frequency chart, which means the AEON2 has to work less. The extender takes on more, right? Right, it takes on the role of the lowest bass frequency band reproduction, and so in my sense, the AEON becomes more responsive because it's not as burdened with the lowest frequency as would be the case when it's working on its own.
Yes, right. The vibrations of the diaphragm in this left situation where the crossover frequency is like 100 hertz, the vibrations of the diaphragm, its amplitude, its velocity, and its acceleration is the lowest one. This situation is the best when you are talking about meats that are radiated at the same time from sorry about that that are radiated at the same time from the woofer. But what is so the less it is like you have, because when you use AEON2 along with its bass extender, you have something like you have just a three-way system.
Exactly. Yeah.
You have normal three-way system.
Exactly.
And of course, what do you change when you're switching between these three positions? You change just the crossover frequency. It is designed in such a way that sorry. It is designed in such a way that all those three different crossover frequencies work okay. So the relations, the phases, the shapes of the amplitude frequency responses, its slopes, and also the shapes of its phase responses are proper in all those
positions.
Positions. And the only what you change is the crossover frequency. So when you switch into the roll-off mode, you have the less vibrations of the diaphragm. So that is why the meats suffer less from the vibrations of the diaphragm.
Okay.
But there is some other issue that is related with this in this two devices, is those frequency responses, and at the same time it's pulse responses or step responses. I mean, impulse responses or steps responses. This is related because those devices at low frequencies are minimum phase devices, and the responses or the characteristics, the frequency responses are related to the pulse responses, and that is. It is related when you what is pulse response in 2 words. When you listen to the music in car, when they try to create as loud bass as possible, so some say that it is a one tone bass. And one tone means that the only, not always, but in most situations, what you hear, it's one tone bass. It is just a resonance frequency of the Helmholtz resonator, because in most cases they are bass reflex enclosures, and they are the resonators. And this is just, it is when you ask what I'm talking about the one tone bass. so and when we come back to the our monitors and the extender, there are no. Of course, we have not such huge problems with the one-tone bass, but anyway, you have always the frequency response, you have always the phase response, and you have always the pulse response or impulse on step response.
There is a
and when you switch between these two positions, you change the relations of the step responses for the extender and for the AEON2.
There is a question from Jeff concerning the crossover between the woofer and the tweeter. Jeff, it's 2.7 kilohertz if memory serves right. And the question is it DSP based? No, it's not. It's pure analog.
Yeah, pure analog.
That's the way we like it at APS, and for the moment we're staying that way. So could we carry on, Greg, please, with the setup of the extender with the AEON2? We're getting close to 5 p.m., so perhaps we'll be closing it off in maybe 15 minutes. Because the way I have set it up, it's at 0. Volume is at 0 in terms of the volume switch that's on the right to the knob on the extender. It's a little bit confusing perhaps for some people. Could you tell us more a little bit about that difference in the extender, in it having 2 sets of volume settings? There's one that's a 3-step switch with 0, 6, 12, and then there is the volume knob on the left that goes from 4.5 to 6, minus 4.5 to 6.
Could you please, shortly repeat your question shortly?
Yeah. Could you tell us the difference and why we've chosen to include 2 separate volume settings on the bass extender? Because bass extender has 2 volumes.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Right?
We have we have one volume controller in AEON2, and you have this similar, not exactly the same, but similar volume controller in bass extender. And when you set the volume in AEON2 at 0 dB, so you can you should also set this volume controller at 0 dB for AEON2, but depending of the environment, maybe you need a little bit more or a little bit less. So that is why we decided to do it in this way, that you can increase or decrease from its 0 position. And this is the rotary controller. And also we have another volume controller which is minus 0 or minus 6 or minus 12 dB. And when you look at the numbers, you can just add them algebraic.
And yeah, mathematically, just basically, if I use the volume setting at 0, but I do minus 6, then I get minus 6. If I put the volume knob at minus 4.5, then I get minus 4.5 minus 6. That's minus 10.5, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And we decided to add another volume controller because there is a possibility that somebody would like to have 2 bass extender for each AEON2 for each.
Yeah, and then you set it at minus 6 or minus 12 accordingly.
Yeah. When you have for the left channel 2 extenders and also for the right channel 2 extenders, you just switch this switch at minus 6, and it is the easier way to calibrate the volume. So and of course, you can have also 4 bass extender for each channel. So you can simply switch at minus 12 dB. Of course, the calibration, the proper calibration, can be done with the rotary.
Rotary, yeah.
Rotary.
Well, I don't think any sane person would go around to his partner or wife asking about having 4 extenders in his room. I don't know. They would find proper words to actually explain the need for such amount of low end.
Another reason. There is another reason for that switch, because when you change the volume at AEON2, you start at 0 dB and you end up at minus 10.5 dB. And when you have only the rotary controller at AEON2 bass extender, you start up at plus 6 and you end up at -4.5. So we have only -4.5. So we can add this -4.5 to 6, and then you have -10.5, just like in the AEON2.
Okay. I think that kind of rounds up this. Standby is obviously for standby. If you switch it on, it'll switch off the bass extender off when it's not in use, and whenever signal is present, it'll start working again. There's a few indicators on the back as well that will light if you happen to be on the back of it and looking at them, so you'll know exactly what's happening. I think we've covered pretty much everything.
Maybe 2 words about the flashing, LEDs.
Yeah, sure. Go
When
ahead.
you look at the front side of the studio monitors,
Yeah.
you have a logo, APS logo, and it leads at in Classic 2020, and it is dark in AEON2.
Precisely, yeah.
It is dark.
It is dark. It lights up when you switch it on.
We decided to do it in this way. And another difference is the indicator when you when you play too loud, when the power amplifier is over. Power amplifier is overloaded.
Okay.
In Classic, you can hear only the overload of the bass of the mid woofer amplifier. And in AEON2, you can also see when you overload the tweeter. For the woofer it flashes it red. The flashes it flashes in red, and in AEON2 for the tweeter it flashes in green. So
okay.
So it is maybe it of course it costs. You spend money for that, but you can protect your tweeter.
That way. Yeah. Sure. I think it's a really good idea. I think that's it for now. I think, folks. So we hope to to see you online on our Facebook webpage. You can also subscribe to this channel. There will be more coming soon. We have a separate series of talks which I do with users of APS, with whom we go over their ways of working, their ways of using APS within the particular workflow that they have. So you're welcome to go through those that we have done already, and we invite you to look forward to the ones we'll be doing this year. Jeff is asking one more thing. What is the optimal SPL for AEON2? But I'm guessing, Jeff, you're asking about more. Are you asking about what's the maximum it can do, or because the thing is that I'm used to more SPL levels being driven by whatever the need of the environment you're mixing for. So if you're mixing for pop or cinema, right, there are certain levels that you should be having in your studio in order to make good judgment calls. I'm wondering, Greg, do you think there is an optimum SPL for AEON2? Because I would be more inclined to say that it's the optimum SPL for you. That's really the most important thing, and the monitor should adapt to whatever your needs are.
I understand the reason for that question. For the question. There are a lot of designs that perform not as good when you play us at low levels. There are some constructions of the. This is mainly related to the power and also related to the driver. and there are power amplifiers whose distortions increase when you decrease the level. But this is not the case when you are talking about AEON2 and also when you're talking about Classic. In AEON2 we have our own power amplifier. It is our construction, and we use the currents. I forget the word. There is no sound coming from the studio monitor. The current is running through the output transistors, power transistors, and because of that current, the distortions are decreased even at very low levels. This is we are talking about the idea how the power amplifier, AB power amplifier, works, and we have you can say that it is a current. It is as I said, the current is running through the transistors, even at very low levels. The current, yes, and that is why it is very good to work with AEON2 at very low levels and at the medium levels. There's no problem.
Well, Jeff,
it is not like this. Yeah.
Jeff seems to be saying that for him, I mean, if I'm working at 60 decibels, there is a lack of frequency response. I don't know, Jeff, if that's precisely to do with the eons or basically, the loudness contours of our ears. I mean, we lose a low end as we go down. So obviously, the human ear doesn't hear as much low and at 60 decibels as it does at 75 or 80, and so I'm wondering whether you're not hearing basically that and not something that's to do with the speaker. Also, one thing that should be taken into account is your acoustics, as the any monitor for that matter will resonate, right? If you're working at 80 decibels, those frequencies, perhaps low end frequencies, which might be actually a sign of a problem in your listening environment, might be bumped up by the SPL level. Whereas if you go down to 60, well, those modes are not activated, and you suddenly have a lack of frequency response. I would be very interested in, for example, having your room run through some basic measurements and to see the waterfall measurements, how your room responds, because it might be simply due to the fact that your low end is not exactly linear, and so when you're listening at 60 decibels you are having a lack of frequency simply because at higher levels the monitor is basically resonating with the modes of the room. One of the things that people often say is to mix at lower levels if you have problems in your room, simply to avoid those problems a little bit at least, right? So I don't think it's to do with the monitor, as Greg has said. The monitor is meant to levels. There shouldn't be any frequency drop at those levels. There's a calibration question. Should the AEON2 receive the max output from the sound card, then lower the input of the speaker? So, well, the way I work, and also it's interesting to have a look at your sound cards, guys, and read a little bit about them and see how exactly is the volume, the whole volume function designed. I'm using Apollo and Apollo X8 with Apollo Twin, that's basically running as a monitor control unit, because it has all the buttons that I need next to me for changing the speaker pairs, doing mono summing and the volume. And so I set it 3/4 up, and then I set my levels accordingly with SPL measurement little measurement unit, and so that I know that at a given level where my lights on the volume knob light up, I know that I'm more or less at this level. I calibrate them to know exactly where I'm at. I would advise at rather using maximum volume output on a sound card and then lowering the monitor. I don't know, Greg, if you think that's problematic in any way, but I've always found that those sound cards sound better in the upper half than the lower half of their volume extension.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that kind of answers that. Well, I think we don't have any more questions. So if that's that, then I think we could say goodbye. Thank you very much for listening, and hopefully we've answered some questions that you've had. We'll have some shortcuts on the YouTube film for you, so that you can quickly go listen just to the portion that interests you precisely. And I hope you'll be joining us for some more live talk APS products. So hello from Poland, and hear you soon. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you very much. Have a nice time.